joining the American Medical Student Association for National Primary Care Week. We are so excited to have everyone able to view this presentation, and really excited to welcome Dr. Loomis to kind of celebrating National Primary Care Week with us. So I'll just start off with his bio, and then we'll just have sort of a video presentation from him, and then we'll do a little bit of a question-and-answer session at the end. So Dr. Loomis received his medical degree from the University of Arkansas, where he was elected to the Alpha Omega Alpha Honor Medical Society and graduated with honors. He subsequently completed his internship and residency in internal medicine at Barnes Hospital, Washington University in St. Louis. In addition, Dr. Loomis received an MBA from the Olin School of Business at Washington University in St. Louis. He is board certified in internal medicine and has also completed the certification program in plant-based nutrition from Cornell University. Dr. Loomis is the medical director at the Bernard Medical Center in Washington, D.C. He has served as team internist for the St. Louis Rams football team and the St. Louis Cardinals baseball team, as well as tour physician for the St. Louis Symphony Orchestra. Before coming to the Bernard Medical Center, he practiced internal medicine at St. Luke's Hospital in St. Louis, where he was also the director of prevention and wellness. He is on the clinical faculty of the Department of Internal Medicine at Washington University School of Medicine. Dr. Loomis also serves on the board of directors of the American College of Lifestyle Medicine. And when not practicing medicine, Dr. Loomis enjoys reading, cooking, and teaching plant-based cooking classes. He also enjoys running, biking, and swimming, and has completed numerous marathons and triathlons.
Thank you.
Yeah, take it away.
Yeah, so welcome everybody, and thanks for giving me this time to speak. And what I kind of wanted to talk about was the role that lifestyle medicine plays, at least I think it plays, a very important role it plays in healthcare today, and kind of how I came to this, to be here in D.C. and helping run the Barnard Medical Center. You know, like many of you all, I really didn't learn anything substantial about lifestyle, in particular nutrition and exercise, and the treatment and prevention and even reversal of chronic disease. The only nutrition education I had in med school was really a glorified biochemistry class, and you know, it was about vitamins and what happens when you didn't get enough vitamins, and you know, what happens when you didn't get enough protein, and on and on. And so as I entered into my career as a primary care physician, you know, I knew nutrition was somewhat important, but you know, I would turn to the U.S. dietary guidelines and such to talk to my patients and give them advice. And it's really the same advice I followed to some degree, you know, that, and if you would have asked me 4 or 5 years ago if I ate healthy, I would have said, sure, you know, I don't eat that many donuts, and I don't eat that many cookies, and I don't eat that much ice cream and cheeseburgers, and those are really all true statements. The disconnect started to become when you know, if you reflect back on that, you know, although it's true I didn't eat many ice cream, you know, or cookies, on Monday the nurses would bring cookies in the office, and Tuesday there'd be donuts in the doctor's lounge, and Wednesday I'd go out for a cheeseburger, and Thursday would be someone's birthday. So in aggregate, my diet really wasn't as healthy as I perceived. And I could kind of get away with that with exercise. And in 2010, I tore my meniscus playing with my dog, and I had to wait to get it fixed, and I was a terrible patient. And you know, so my leg got weak, and I didn't do the rehab after. So I ended up putting on a ton of weight, and slowly but surely became a patient myself. And I developed sleep apnea, and that led to atrial fibrillation, and then I had prediabetes and high cholesterol. And I started to collect doctors, and my doctors treated me just like I treated my patients. Not once did anyone ask me about my lifestyle. You know, I got prescribed first this sexy CPAP machine, which is really great to wear at night. You know, I had pills, my cardiologist gave me pills for the atrial fibrillation. My internist wanted to put me on statins. And, you know, if you think about it, that's what we call healthcare today. But that's not healthcare, right? That's sick care. And that's how I treated my patients, because that's what I was taught in medical school. You know, patients would come in with high blood pressure, and I would give them prescription for antihypertensives. I might talk about lifestyle, but in a very kind of non-operational way. You know, the dialogue might go, lose some weight, cut back on the salt, exercise more, and we know you can't do that, you know, which went unsaid, and we pass out pills. And the pills work great. I mean, the patients would come back, and blood pressure was doing great, but now, now their cholesterol's high. So we iterate that again. And patients come back, and now their blood pressure and cholesterol is great, but now they have type 2 diabetes. So we go through this process of allowing patients to become sick, and then we prescribe them treatments that have side effects, they're expensive. We allow people to accumulate disability. You get cancer, and then we give you chemo, and then you have heart disease, and we give you a stent or cut your chest open. And kind of toward the end of the line, you get Alzheimer's, and we put you in a nursing home because you run out of stuff to do. And so in this sick care system we operate today, we have the ability through technology and pharmacology to add years to people's lives, but we take away life from their years as they age. Again, we give them these drugs that have side effects and such. And I saw that happen to myself as I got plugged into this kind of sick care system that we had. And one day in the summer of 2011, I was laying on the couch one day flipping through Netflix, and I came across the documentary Forks Over Knives, which is about using plant-based nutrition as medicine, really. Food is medicine. And it was such an, as I reflect back, it's pretty unbelievable what a radical concept that was, that I could, in fact, use food as medicine to help treat my own personal health. And so, I came back and I looked at some of the primary research, and I decided literally overnight to try a plant-based diet and see what happened. And so I literally, within a few days went cold turkey and eliminated, processed foods and processed grains, and I eliminated meat and dairy, and decided to get my knee back in shape. And within 3 months, without really any change in exercise, I ended up losing about 30, 40 pounds. But my cholesterol dropped from 260 to 150, and my sleep apnea went away, and the AFib went away, and my allergies went away, and my sugars and A1C dropped and back into normal range. And it really was this miraculous kind of transformation. And that's when I realized that what healthcare really is, and healthcare is really it's really focusing on the root cause of these chronic diseases. And because if you really think about what arguably what I was taught in med school was really the wrong thing, so to speak, in that I was taught how to take care of high blood pressure, and how to take care of cancer, and how to take care of heart disease and all that. But what I wasn't taught was the question we should be asking is that why is someone's blood pressure high, and why are they overweight, and why did they get cancer, and why did they get heart disease? Because when you flip that equation upside down, the answer is more likely than not all the same, right? And it's the food we put in our mouths, and the how much exercise we get, and how we deal with stress, and how we cope with stress. And to kind of put that into an evolutionarily if you think about human physiology and metabolism through the lens of evolutionary biology, if you will, we evolved to accomplish the singular task that any biologic system has, and that's to find a mate and pass on our DNA. And until the fairly recent past, the last few thousand years, the two tasks we had to accomplish for that to occur was to be able to go find food when we're starving and not be someone else's food when they were starving. And so our whole stress response, because those are stressful events, starving and getting run away from leopards, our whole stress response evolved to help facilitate physical activity through adrenaline on the front end and cortisol on the back end to help us heal. And assuming we survived and we found food or we got away from the leopard, that's when we would rest, recover, and refuel. And we would refuel with the nutritional resources that were around us. And the cycle of stress, activity, recovery over time is how we built resilience. That's how we get stronger and faster and smarter and could endure more stress. You fast forward to the modern age, the world we live in today, we don't do any of that anymore, right? I mean, how much energy does an individual have to expend to get more energy? Well, zero, right? You call up Uber Eats, they bring it to your door. You walk through the grocery store and you put energy into your cart. You give an order for energy to the waiter at the restaurant. The kinds of energy and nutrients we consume, for the most part, bear little to no resemblance to what we're really supposed to be eating, and I'll circle back to that in a sec. We don't face stress or threat physically anymore. We run and fight emotionally, and we worry about a lot more stuff than running away from leopards and starving to death. We worry about jobs and money and relationships and politics and traffic and terrorism and on and on and on. And we compound that by not adequately rest and recovering. We tend to over-caffeinate and over-alcohol. So over time, it's not resilience that we develop, it's exhaustion, mental, physical, hormonal. And again, arguably, it's this evolutionarily mismatched lifestyle, which is the root cause of 90% of the chronic diseases that I see every day in clinical primary care practice. Genetics plays a role, but except in very rare circumstances. Genetics rarely makes up more than 5 to 10% of the risk for any chronic disease. Yet that's we oftentimes feel, well, everyone in my family has high blood pressure, so it's inevitable I'm going to get it too. But that's just simply not true. So to be well, and so to help to practice true health care, we have to help our patients achieve wellness in these 3 separate but highly connected domains. We have to achieve physical wellness, and we do that by moving around 30, 45 minutes most days. We have to achieve emotional wellness, and that's about stress and how we cope with stress and how we recover from stress. And we have to achieve nutritional wellness, and that means we need to eat what we're supposed to eat and not eat what we're not supposed to eat. The idea about moderation, I think, is, if you want to get diabetes in moderation or get cancer in moderation, then you can eat bad foods in moderation. And again, I'll talk about that again in a little bit more in a minute. So, but these domains are highly connected. You cannot be emotionally well without physical activity, because our stress response, again, evolved to help facilitate exercise. So when we overstress and under-exercise, the adrenaline that we create in response to that, because our brains can't tell the difference between worrying about your job and seeing a leopard, it leads to, it raises our blood pressure, and it makes us anxious, and it gives us insomnia, which compounds the stress because now we're not sleeping to recover from the stress. There's a fundamental connection between diet and exercise. I mean, people don't put their car in the garage for a year and put gas in 5 times a day. You don't put bad gas in your car and expect it to run right. You don't put 30 pounds of, you don't put 30 gallons of gas in your car if it only holds 15. Yet we take better care of our cars than we do of ourselves. And if you're taking your car to 3 or 4 different mechanics for 3 or 4 different problems, and they keep telling you each time that this is, that it's because of you're putting bad gas in the car, my suggestion would be get a new mechanic, because, if he says, well, if you put less bad gas, you come back in 6 months instead of 3 months, again, it's back to this idea about moderation, and, if you want your car to run right, you got to put the right kind of gas in, and it's the same thing the way we fuel our bodies. And now I think most people understand that we need to move around regularly, and I think people understand that we need to, get a good night's sleep and not stress out all the time. I think the black hole for many of us, though, is the nutrition piece. And again, I think we make nutrition way too complicated as far as what it means to really eat healthy. We were not hunter-gatherers, despite what you hear. We were really gatherer-hunters. And most of what we gathered in temperate climates was whole food, plant-based sources of energy. It was roots and stems and leaves and seeds and fruits and nuts and vegetables and berries and legumes. There weren't any processed sugar trees or canola oil bushes or whatever. So we were really not designed to use these highly processed foods as energy. Although in the standard American diet, that makes up about 75% of people's calories. We're not designed to eat dairy products because we had to domesticate mammals first. That didn't occur until about 6,000 to 8,000 years ago, depending on the species. And, that may seem like a long time ago, but that's a very recent addition to our nutritional repertoire. And if you think about what milk is, it's a biologic fluid that turns a small mammal into a big mammal that can go find food on its own. We're designed to use our mother's milk until we wean, and then, but again, that's not, that's not what we're told by the dairy industry. You got to, get milk for protein and calcium. Where does the protein that's in the milk, where did it come from? It came from the grass that the cow ate, because cows are vegan, right? Same thing with the calcium. We did eat meat. It just wasn't very much. And the meat we ate, however, it came from cows and, came from wild animals that ate what they were supposed to eat, not cows and pigs and chickens stuffed full of corn and antibiotics and hormones and God knows what else. Now, I think you can make an argument that our ancestors had a survival advantage to have that concentrated animal protein, to get big and strong before they died of some infectious disease when they were 30. And, we now, because of sanitation and antibiotics, we've almost tripled our lifespan. So we've unmasked all these chronic diseases, many of which, almost all of which, have been associated with both the overconsumption of animal protein and fat as well as processed foods. And then when you start to consider some of the environmental consequences of the way we raise animals, exposures to antibiotic-resistant bacteria and antibiotic residue, hormones, pesticide and herbicide residues, the land and water use required to grow animals. I mean, a quarter pounder with cheese takes about 700 gallons of water to make. That's the amount of water that the average American uses to shower every day for 2 months. So if you're trying to conserve water in a drought in California, the answer is not low-flow shower heads necessarily. You get a much greater impact by not eating meat. So, and then the contribution to climate change, and not to mention how we treat animals. And so I would argue that a whole food plant-based diet really is the optimum diet for both human health but also planetary health. And I want to make a clear distinction. I don't personally self-identify as being vegan. Veganism historically is a kind of it comes from a ethical place. It's about not eating animals, not wearing animal products, not using products tested on animals. But there's a lot of really unhealthy stuff that's vegan. So white flour's vegan, sugar's vegan, Dr. Pepper's vegan, Oreos are vegan. So I eat a diet that's vegan, except I also don't eat all that highly processed foods, and that's in our practice, which I'll talk more about in a bit. That's what we emphasize. It's not, and there's a lot of confusion. In fact, when we first opened, we had a lot of junk food vegans who had, high blood pressure and type 2 diabetes and obesity, because being vegan doesn't necessarily mean eating healthy. So, and what's interesting is, we have this, we're going to spend $4 trillion on healthcare this year, close to $4 trillion. The CDC estimates that 75% of that plus is spent on chronic disease, almost all of which are preventable through lifestyle. 1 in every 5 healthcare dollars and 1 in every 3 Medicare, Medicaid dollars are spent on the treatment of type 2 diabetes, which is arguably the kind of the prototypical foodborne illness. Yet we, we've seen diabetes and obesity rates as our healthcare spending has skyrocketed over the past 3 or 4 decades. We've seen diabetes and obesity rates skyrocket as well. So we spend all this money, yet we're much unhealthier than we were. My kid's generation, it's estimated is going to be the first generation in hundreds of years where I will live longer potentially than my kids, and that's really tragic. In many ways, we've normalized this, right? When 2/3 of the U.S. population is either overweight or obese, 2/3 of the U.S. population either has prediabetes or diabetes, 70% of the U.S. population is taking at least one drug for a lifestyle-related disease. This has become normal. And then we compound that by teaching med students to treat these chronic diseases as opposed to really thinking about, true prevention. And then, the ubiquitous nature of processed foods, what we serve our kids in schools, what we serve our patients in hospitals. What kind of message does it send to a patient, when they're CCU after an MI and, and they get eggs and bacon as a choice on the menu. And so we really, it's really a crazy world we live in. The studies show that 4 simple habits, so don't smoke, alcohol in moderation, exercise regularly, and have a healthy eating index, prevented there was an 80% reduction in heart disease and an 80% reduction in type 2 diabetes and a 40% reduction in cancer, which clearly drives most of those healthcare costs. Yet we don't learn about it and we don't talk about it. and again, it's just this kind of crazy world we live in, and you know, for me, once I had this knowledge, once I understood the fundamental importance of lifestyle and the role it played in prevention, you know, once you have that knowledge, you can't unhave it. And I, you know, was trying to practice. I was an internist in St. Louis when this all kind of transpired, and as I started to try to teach my patients, you know, it was very difficult because, you know, St. Louis is probably one of the best sick care towns in the world. You know, we have Washington University and St. Louis University, but trying to practice true health care was very difficult. You know, many of the dietitians, you know, the way we learn about nutrition today, I think is fundamentally flawed because it's based in this kind of paradigm of nutritional reductionism, you know, where we stop talking about food. And I think it's this disconnection from food as a society that drives, you know, is probably the biggest part of the problem, both healthcare professionals, but, you know, the general public as a whole. You know, we have stopped, we don't talk about food, we talk about protein, we talk about carbs, and we talk about vitamins, we talk about fiber. And so when we take this nutritional reductionist approach to food, it gives us some wacky ideas. And, you know, we've gone through some cycles. We were, you know, demonizing fat and worshiping carbs, and now we're demonizing carbs and worshiping protein. But they're not the same thing. I mean, carbs, you know, if you take an apple, for example, a small apple has maybe 100 calories, 25 grams of carbs, mainly from fructose. But where's the sugar at? Well, it's in the apple. We eat the apple, physical work to digest it, soluble fiber absorbs water, we slowly extract the sugar and the other vitamins and minerals and on, and all is good. Our sugar levels rise very slowly. We don't get a big spike in insulin. Take the same apple, squeeze out the exact same 100 calories, the exact same 25 grams of carbs, you take it to the chemistry lab, you analyze it, in a calorimeter, it's the same, you analyze the carbs biochemically, it's the same. Put it in a glass and you drink it, it is not the same physiologically in any way, shape, or form, because that sugar is absorbed right out of the upper part of our duodenum, our sugar levels spike. Yet when we think about nutritional reductionism, you know, people will equate a 100-calorie snack pack of Oreos and a 100-calorie in an apple. Or you'll have diabetics who come in and say, I'm not eating apples or tomatoes or carrots because there's too much sugar, which is, you know, insane. And so as I started to kind of try to shift my focus and really talk about food and understand where food comes from, because again, I think it's this fundamental disconnection from food. Most people have no idea where our food comes from. We don't know the dirt it's grown in. We don't know what we put on the dirt. We don't know how it's processed. We don't know why we crave it, and we don't know what it does to our bodies. We just, you know, we've just learned McDonald's is cheap, McDonald's tastes good, I'm in a hurry, McDonald's is convenient, I'm going to get to McDonald's without ever stopping to think, what did I just feed myself, or even worse, my kids? Was it even food? You know, arguably Michael Pollan, the food writer, would say, no, it's not, it's edible food-like substances. So, so as I was trying to kind of navigate this in St. Louis, I had met Neil Barnard, who's the, you know, the president of the Physician Committee for Responsible Medicine. And I had heard a rumor he was opening a clinic here, which is really based on lifestyle medicine here in DC. And through a series of fortunate events and serendipity, I ended up applying to be the medical director here, really on a whim, and ended up accepting the job and moved here about 18 months ago to open up the Barnard Medical Center. And what we do here is we are a standard, you know, medical practice. We practice primary care. I do write prescriptions for cholesterol medicine and statins and metformin and such. But everybody who comes in gets to learn that there is a different path that they can go down. And really it's about educating them about the power of lifestyle, and particularly nutrition. And give them, we've developed kind of a toolkit, if you will, to help people navigate the change process, because change is hard, that will allow them to transition, you know, hopefully, you know, off some of these medicines. And the results are really astounding when people really engage. I mean, I've seen literally dozens and dozens of patients who came in with long-standing type 2 diabetes on insulin and metformin, who within 3 or 4 months are off all their meds and have normalized their A1C. I've seen patients who had lifelong psoriasis autoimmune diseases, who within 3 or 4 months of going on a plant-based diet and adapting an exercise program and, getting control of the stress in their lives, completely reverse their psoriasis or any other autoimmune disease as well, through adapting a healthy lifestyle. And so it's immensely rewarding to see that kind of success, but it does take time. So the way we've structured our clinic here, we have as many in-house dietitians as we do clinicians, and everyone who comes in gets access to a free 12-week class that rotates every 3 months. They just start over on various aspects of learning how to eat healthy. Some are about the science, the relationship between diet and diabetes or diet and cancer. Some are around behavior change, overcoming emotional eating, things like that. And then some are practical advice, like how do you read nutrition labels and how do you build a pantry and things like that. The patients who have gone through that program, again, have had tremendous success in making long-lasting, permanent, really, lifestyle change. And the other thing I think the classes provide is because change is hard, and you really do feel like you're fish swimming upstream because your coworkers and your family and stuff think you've lost your mind, which is what happened to me. And so it really also creates kind of a social network around the change process itself, and where people can come and ask questions in the group and learn from each other. And that, again, that's besides the knowledge transfer itself, that's the biggest compliment we get about those classes. We also offer we have a Food for Life program that PCRM offers, and that's free both to patients and in the community, which also includes some cooking demonstrations and such as that. We have a very aggressive lunch and learn program where we go out. I go out to corporations locally, many government agencies, and speak on the transformational power of a plant-based diet. People are wanting to learn about this stuff. I think people are tired of being sick, and with movies like Forks Over Knives and What the Health, and books like Michael Greger's book, How Not to Die, and the China study by T. Colin Campbell, and Dr. Esselson's book about preventing and reversing heart disease, the word is out there, and we have many patients come to us because they've gone to their primary care doctor and said, I read this book or I saw this documentary and I don't want to be on these meds anymore. And the doctor says, well, you can't cure type 2 diabetes, so that's crazy, it's not going to work. And they come here for some guidance and consultation to help them navigate that path. But increasingly when we go into the community, it's really astounding how many people this message kind of resonates with, because I think people understand that, the environment we live in, the food we eat, and the sitting around on your rear end all day and stressing out all the time is not good for our health. And I think finally, after many years, people are finally starting to come around and understand how important this is. It's also heartening. I just got back from the 5th International Plant-Based Nutrition Conference, which was in Anaheim last week. I went to the first one 5 years ago, and there was about 200 people. We had over 950, almost 1,000 attendees, and had to turn away. The registration closed. It had to turn away almost 200 additional registrants because it was full. And to me, that's just astounding that this, there were students and doctors and nurses and health coaches and nutritionists and hospital administrators and on there to really learn more about lifestyle. So I think, and I think that's why it's so important as a med student to really start to understand the importance of lifestyle, to advocate for it within your medical school, because if you look, only about 25% or less of med schools even come anywhere near meeting the minimum requirements for recommended nutrition education. Many of them don't offer any at all. And even the nutrition education that's taught, I would argue, is flawed in some way, because it's often based in this kind of nutritional reductionism that I talked about earlier. We at PCRM, Physicians Committee, so Barnard Medical Center is kind of a subsidiary of that. We have a lot of resources for med students who are interested in setting up kind of interest groups around nutrition. We offer we can arrange speakers to come, speak at your school or give grand rounds or whatever. So we have a lot of information and resources available for students who are interested, again, in promoting lifestyle medicine within their organizations or within their schools. The American College of Lifestyle Medicine also has a physicians in training program, which offers discounted membership. That conference is coming up actually in a couple of weeks, and it's in Tucson, and that's a great conference too. And they have a lot of resources as well around helping students advocate for lifestyle medicine within their organizations. So I think we could take some questions. If there's anything else that you all would like to know about, I'd be happy to share. But I think that I've rambled on for a while now, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you all have.
All right, so we got some questions here.
Yeah.
Motivating patients to change their diet drastically when they don't really have a lot of internal motivation.
Yeah, so that is the million-dollar question. So the question, how do you motivate patients to change? And having kind of been through that process personally, where I had to, I went through this profound change, and for the first time in my, many years, it stuck, if you will. So here's the way I think about this, and there's some science behind this as well, and this is what, when I talk to patients, the process of change. So first of all, two things. So first of all, we forget that eating, the reason this is so difficult around eating in particular, is that eating is a learned behavior, and it's a habit. And our habits form, there's an evolutionary basis for that. So when we, if you had to think about walking through the woods, I have to contract my quads, flex my hip, bend my knee, you would have walked right past the ripe berries and you wouldn't have seen the leopard, right? So our brains evolved a mechanism when we automate a task, whether it be eating, walking, the modern world driving, our subconscious brain takes that over for us. And that allows our conscious brain to continue to scan the environment for opportunity and threat. So when so eating is one of those behaviors. So say you go to a restaurant, you've learned to like white bread, right? So all of your triggers to start eating, whether they be emotional triggers, environmental triggers, physical triggers, your food preferences, start and stop eating, your triggers start and stop eating, all that stuff are learned behaviors. And so you go to a restaurant, and if the environmental trigger you've learned to eat white bread is the waiter puts it on the table, at that moment in time, you don't have to think about eating the bread. You have to think about not eating the bread, right? And if you don't think about not eating the bread, which you're probably not going to do if you're out with friends and family and you've been working all day and you're tired of thinking, then you eat the bread, and there's nothing you can do about it. There's no willpower you can conjure up. I mean, that's the way our brains are designed. Now, you can relearn that. Driving is another example of this. And if you move to London, you're going to have to learn how to drive on the other side of the street. And it takes 3 to 6 months. Every time you get in that car, you got to be mindful of which side of the road am I on, which side of the pedestrian's coming from. But you do that over and over in about 3 to 6 months. One day you get in the car, and that's just how you drive. And when people say, well, do you miss driving on the other side of the street? You'd say, well, that's kind of a crazy question because I don't drive that way anymore. And so that's what this is about, ultimately, is teaching our patients how to drive in London. And again, back to this idea about moderation, I mean, you wouldn't think about driving on the wrong side of the road in moderation because you would just have a moderate number of head-on collisions and run over a moderate number of pedestrians. Yet when we eat unhealthful foods in moderation, we're running over our endothelium and we're running over the lining of our colon and, breast cancer and our prostate, each and every time we do that. And so, again, that's why I think moderation you have to be very careful about. So how do you teach people to drive in London? And I think that process, the analogy I like to use is it's like pushing a snowball over the top of a mountain. If you get the snowball over the top, you don't have to push anymore. And because once that happens, you start to lose weight. You feel better. You're not taking all these drugs that have side effects. You like the way you look in clothes. You have more energy. On and on. The hard part's getting the snowball to the top. And some people's mountains are really tall and the slope's really steep. And so I think there's three things that we have to help our patients with to navigate that process. So the first thing is, fundamentally, you got to have a reason to push. And I think that we as clinicians come at this the wrong way oftentimes, because we talk about things, we oftentimes address this out of a paradigm of fear. If you don't quit smoking, you're going to get lung cancer. If you don't get your blood pressure under control, you're going to have a stroke. If you don't get your cholesterol down, you're going to have a heart attack. Yet, if you don't get your diabetes under control, you're going to get your foot cut off. Yet, despite that knowledge, and people already know that, for the most part, it doesn't facilitate change. So a different way to motivate, to find purpose, if you will, because that's what we're talking about, is really to ask a different question. Why would it be important for you not to have a heart attack, not to have a stroke, not to get your foot cut off? And oftentimes what I'll do is actually give people 4 or 5 pieces of paper, and I'll label the top, heart disease, stroke, foot cut off, colon cancer, whatever. And I'll ask them to go home and write down the top 5 reasons that they don't want these things to occur. And what ends up coming back is 1 piece of paper, because purpose lies in it's things like, I want to be around for my kids or my grandkids or my retirement, or I want to volunteer, or I want to play the top 100 golf course in the world. Whatever it is that motivates you, that's purpose. That's real purpose. But people have to find that, because sometimes this gets really difficult, and if you don't have something to fall back on, it's going to be difficult to navigate the process itself. The second thing is you got to figure out how to lower the height of the mountain and the slope of the road, and those are really barriers to change. And so so those can be things like emotional eat. I eat when I'm stressed out. I hate my job and I eat when I'm stressed out. I don't know how to cook. I don't know how to shop. I travel. I'm on a limited budget. I don't have much time. My kids won't buy into all this. So whatever those barriers are, and there's a fairly finite list, what we've done here at Barnard is really try to develop a toolkit around that so that we can ask those questions and then provide patients with the resources they need, whether it be a health coach, whether it be a psychologist or a counselor for the more severe emotional mental health drivers of bad behaviors, whether it be online cooking classes, whether it be our classes that we offer, whether it be web resources. Forks Over Knives has a great cooking class and a meal planner, on and on. So it's really about understanding and asking the questions around what makes this so hard, and then and making sure that you follow up on that at each step of the way. What's been successful? What are you struggling with? And really helping patients navigate this. And again, it's usually about 3 to 4 months is kind of the rough spot. And then lastly, the third thing that has to happen to get people to change is that really you got to help them, it's very, very important that they recruit as many people as they can to help push the snowball. And whether it be friends or family, whether it be coworkers, whether it be, join one of our classes where the other people in the class help push along. When those 3 things are in place, when people have purpose, when we work actively to lower the slope of the mountain and the slope of the road and the height of the mountain through understanding and addressing their barriers to change, and then helping them find support, meaningful support. The patients who engage in at that level have tremendous success, and research out of PCRM would suggest that compliance rates in the 80–90% range, even at 2 or 3 years out, which is how far our data goes. Because again, the results, because especially around food, we're not talking about things you can't do. It's things you can do. It's a positive thing. And people will say this is the easiest weight I've ever lost because I just eat. I'm not counting carbs. I'm not counting points. I'm not measuring stuff. I'm just eating food. And so again, once people kind of engage and understand the simplicity, really, I tell patients all the time, this is very, very simple. There's no rocket science around it, but it's just not easy. And again, so it's the crafting this kind of toolkit, if you will, to make it easier for patients to change. So does that make sense?
Yeah, awesome. Couple more questions. So do you see medical education changing to reflect the benefits of things like lifestyle medicine and nutrition? And how do you recommend students pursue training in these fields if it's not emphasized in medical education?
So what was the last part? What was the last part of the question?
How do you recommend students, like medical students, pursue extra training in these fields if it's not provided in medical school?
Right. So, I think there is some change. So there's a couple of issues here. You know, unfortunately, both in residency programs and then in medical schools, one of the measures of success is either board certification pass rates or passing the federal licensing exams. And so that forces these programs to teach to the exam, right? So if nutrition, for example, or lifestyle is not emphasized on the licensing tests or on the board exams, then the programs typically aren't going to spend a lot of time and resources to teach that, no matter how much evidence is there. I think there are a lot of people kind of working on this. American College of Lifestyle Medicine is working on this. We've done some work on this legislatively and kind of lobbying the National Board of Medical Licensing Boards. But that's a kind of a slow process, as you might imagine. But I think schools are starting to understand as well. I just joined the faculty at USIS here in Bethesda, which is the Uniformed Services Hospital for University for Health Sciences, which is the medical school, if you will, for the armed services. About 30% of active duty military physicians trained at USIS. And we're helping them design a culinary medicine program to pilot in the spring to help students we're using a case-based approach to help students really understand the role lifestyle plays in particular food around managing and treating chronic disease. We're also helping retrain their dietitians from the way, the traditional kind of nutritional reductionism that they learn and when you go through a program and more toward whole food, plant-based, thinking about food as well. And so we are starting to see change for sure. As far as additional training goes, fortunately, in this day and age, there's a ton of great books out there. I mean, this is what I had to do because I didn't learn any of this in med school. Michael Greger's book, How Not to Die, is an evidence-based book. It's 600 pages long, and 300 of those are medical references. I recommend that both to patients, but also to colleagues who are interested. Nutritionfacts.org is another. It's also Dr. Greger's website. He has short vignettes, short videos on various subjects, again, evidence-based about nutrition and health. The China Study, again, is another great book that's based in science. The T. Colin Campbell Foundation offers certification in plant-based nutrition through online learning at eCornell, which I've taken. It was quite helpful as far as learning more about the science and evidence behind why this is so important. Conferences like the plant-based, there's 2 or 3 conferences now that medical conferences, the biggest one being the International Plant-Based Healthcare Nutrition Conference, which occurs every September. I think next year it's in Phoenix. That's run by the Plantrition Project, and if you go to plantritionproject.org, there's additional resources there, but you can learn more about the conference. American College of Lifestyle Medicine, again, great resource to learn about more of the practical aspects of how you think about implementing plant-based lifestyle into clinical practice. The Peapod Conference, which is plant-based prevention of disease conference, which is in May typically. I think it's going to be in Raleigh-Durham at NC State. Is another great conference. Again, that's for patients that want to learn and keep up with the current science behind all this. So again, I think increasingly it's easier and easier, and again, on the patient side too, and even students, I think, it's interesting. So I speak around the world really about this, and I was in Champaign, Illinois, late spring this year, speaking at a cardiology conference, and about preventing and treating and reversing heart disease with plant-based nutrition. And I walk in the morning, and they have a breakfast buffet for the doctors, and it had bacon and eggs and sausage on the breakfast buffet. And I got a little irritated, and I wasn't quite sure how to diplomatically handle it because they'd invited me to come and all. And at the end of my talk, someone raised their hand and said, we know this is important, the evidence is strong, but how do we get our patients to change? Just like the question you asked. And it kind of hit me. I said, it has to start with us as clinicians, because if you talked to a patient yesterday afternoon about eating healthy, and they wandered into this conference this morning and they saw what was on that breakfast buffet and they saw what everyone was eating, they're not going to believe a word you say because you don't even believe this is important. And so I think, as a student, as a healthcare professional, really understanding this and living it is extremely important, because if you don't believe this is important, your patients aren't going to believe that. And if you look, physicians, we don't learn anything about nutrition. Only like 25% of even for office visits, primary care office visits, for patients who have obesity, high blood pressure, type 2 diabetes, they only get nutritional counseling 25% of the time. That's insane, right? We live in this kind of treatment paradigm that the way we think about chronic disease. One of the reasons is because when and this has been shown, when a doctor doesn't know how to cook, when a doctor doesn't lead a healthy lifestyle, guess what? They don't talk to their patients about it, right? And although the obesity rates and exercise rates are not quite as bad as the general public, still 40–50% of physicians are either overweight or obese. Only about 40–50% exercise on a regular basis. And so we have to believe this is important and embrace it personally as part of our lifestyle. Now, I'm not suggesting everyone needs to go vegan or plant-based, but we do need to understand what being healthy is, and I think we need to embrace that because that's the only way. That's when our patients are truly going to engage. And again, I think that's part of the power of my story, because I had patients who thought I had cancer. I lost so much weight, and when they found out what happened, they were like, "Well, if he can do it, I can do it." And so, I think you have to. You really have to come to this and believe it and live it. You're going to have the best success of talking to your patients and your colleagues and your students, fellow students, and your colleagues and your teachers, and on and on and on. So, and again, also, engaging us or ACLM. They're just starting a speakers bureau, which just got funded, to come speak to the faculty, come speak to the students, and educate them about the importance of this.
Okay, so kind of going off that, I know a couple of our attendees today have done, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the program, the Whole 30.
Yep.
So, I guess, what's your thoughts on programs like that, and kind of going off that, what, obviously, med students, physicians, a lot of people these days have really busy lifestyles, and they're gone for, 10, 12 hours a day. How do you maintain that, those eating habits?
I think Whole 30 is reasonably healthy. It's more almost a little paleo-ish for me. And by the way, we could do a whole talk on the absurdity of thinking about it. So what? It's interesting. What I talked about earlier is paleo with a little p, right? But there's no such thing as a paleo diet. There was no paleo brownie mix back 10,000 years ago. But I don't want to digress too far. Again, this gets back to what I was saying earlier about understanding what the barrier is. So I'm single and I'm really busy, right? So on Sundays I bought a electronic pressure cooker, Instant Pot, and on Sundays I batch cook a grain like rice or quinoa or something like that, and a legume, beans or lentils, chickpeas or whatever, in my pressure cooker, and then I go to the farmer's market. And then I use those 3 components to build dishes the rest of the week. So, you know, with those 3 things, by varying the flavor, the spices, I can make, you know, a Mediterranean wrap, and I can make a Indian curry, and I can make a Southwest soup. So using strategies like that, you know, I'll cook a huge bowl of soup, or maybe 2 or 3 different soups on Sunday, and then freeze them into servings, so that when I'm really busy and I don't feel like cooking, I can come home and just throw it in the microwave or take it to work the next day and eat. So, you know, I think the hardest part of all this is planning and thinking ahead, because making a healthy lentil soup takes 20 minutes at most at night. But you got to have lentils in your pantry, and you got to have kale in your crisper, and you got to have a couple carrots, you know, in your fridge, and you got to have a can of, you know, diced tomatoes, and you got to have some basil and some oregano in your spice cabinet. And so I think the biggest challenge for most of us is the pre-preparation. You know, again, if you go to like the Plantrition Project, they have a resource page, and there's a whole section there on, you know, 30-minute meals for 30 minutes or less. So, you know, there's no barriers that aren't fairly easy to overcome, but you have to think. You can't think about it when you get home and you open the refrigerator and it's empty. That, oh my, you know, I need to eat. There's nothing here, so I'm going to order Domino's, which is typically what happens a lot of times. So it's really about just forethought and thinking ahead and getting into a routine. And once you do that, it's pretty easy to navigate, frankly.
Awesome. That was all really helpful information. We're almost to the hour mark, so we know you're probably on your lunch hour, and we don't want to take any more of your time. But thank you so much. That was an awesome webinar. We will be posting this on our Facebook page.
Okay, great.
I can certainly send you the link if you'd like, as long as you're okay with that.
Yeah, and you can actually, if you just want to tag me in it, that's fine too. So okay. I'm on Facebook, and that way, most of my Facebook following is really around health.